Pag naglo-low pressure, kinakabahan po ako kasi baka naalala ko yung bagyong Odette. Nag-aral po kami dati, module lang po namin matutunan. Pag sa module, pag di mo nasagutan ang tanong, bababa grades mo, pwede kang bumagsak.
Dito po kami nagtago yung bagyong Odette kasi sobrang lakas ng hangin. Dito po.
Mga ilan kayo dito?
Mga lagpas 20 or 15 lang po.
Nag-ano na yung mga teacher na nag-face to face na excited po ako. Kasi po, pag sa face to face, maintindihan mo yung mga teacher ng maayos, tinuturuan ka ng maayos. Po ang mga binigay ng UNICEF. Meron pong color pencils, tapos po mga crayons, tapos mga scissors po, tapos mga notebook, tapos po sketch pad. Nakakatulong po ito sa pangarap kong maging architect. Kasi po mahilig kami mag-drawing ng mga kapatid ko, tapos masaya po sa atin. Paglaki po, pag naging architect na ako, tapos mag-iipon na ako ng mga pera, tapos papagawa ko itong school.
pag naglo-low pressure, kinakabahan po ako kasi baka naalala ko yung bagyong Odette. Nag-aral po kami dati, module lang po namin matutunan. Pag sa module, pag di mo nasagutan ang tanong, bababa grades mo, pwede kang bumagsak.
Dito po kami nagtago yung bagyong Odette kasi sobrang lakas ng hangin. Dito po,
Mga ilan kayo dito?
mga lagpas 20 or 15 lang po.
Nag-ano na yung mga teacher na nag-face to face na excited po ako. Kasi po, pag sa face to face, maintindihan mo yung mga teacher ng maayos, tinuturuan ka ng maayos.
Po ang mga binigay ng UNICEF. Meron pong color pencils, tapos po mga crayons, tapos mga scissors po, tapos mga notebook, tapos po sketch pad. Nakakatulong po ito sa pangarap kong maging architect.
Kasi po, mahilig kami mag-drawing ng mga kapatid ko. Tapos masaya po sa atin. Paglaki ko, pag naging architect na ako, tapos mag-iipon na ako ng mga pera, tapos papagawa ko itong school.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to Rebuilding Responsive Learning Spaces, diving into alternative learning modalities. I'm Kay, and I will be your host for this activity. We are streaming this event via INNOTECH's Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn pages. We are also being streamed on DepEd's Facebook page, DepEd Tayo. Hello to everyone joining us today. Thank you. We are happy to see some viewers. I think we'll have more later from different parts of the Philippines and Southeast Asia. I'm sure we're all excited to exchange stories with our guests. Let us know more on how we can make learning spaces more responsive to the unique and ever-changing needs of learners, especially those who cannot readily attend traditional school-based education due to many reasons. The recent pandemic highlighted the need to innovate and try out alternative means to continue learning. As schools transition back to the normal setup, let's not forget what we have learned during the pandemic, along with the innovations that allowed us to sustain education. By looking back at these practices, we can develop strategies that will help us adapt to different situations smoothly and easily. To start, let's hear a message from the Center Director of SEAMEO INNOTECH, Professor Leonor Magtolis, Briones.
Good day to each and every participant in our online learning session. I understand that we have participants and learners from all over Southeast Asia who are linked to us via Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this learning session dubbed or described as Rebuilding Responsive Learning Spaces, Diving into Alternative Learning Modalities. This online activity is part of SEAMEO INNOTECH's initiative to help address the emerging education needs of Southeast Asia. 3 years ago, the education world experienced one of its worst disruptions, which is the global COVID pandemic. Schools were closed worldwide to prevent the spread of the virus. But this was far from another dark age, so-called. Educators continued to innovate and find ways for children to continue learning. Our battle cry at that time was, education must continue no matter what, no matter where, and no matter how. The pandemic led to the development of different alternative learning modalities for our teachers and our parents. Alternative learning is not new. I too learned through alternative means when schools were unavailable as far back as the Second World War. I learned how to read and write through sessions held by my mother, who was a grade school teacher. In Southeast Asia, different modes of learning delivery are in place, not just during or after an emergency. Alternative learning modalities are adapted to address concerns of education access, especially in remote areas. It is also offered as an option for learners who cannot attend formal schools regularly. Thus, from all our past experiences, we want to further highlight the importance of the continuity of learning and how alternative learning can make this happen. This online learning session aims to help build schools learning spaces that are responsive and adaptive to the changing contexts and needs of learners. This also aims to spark further conversation on how alternative learning can be applied in different learning spaces. We are pleased to have this dynamic lineup of speakers for our learning session. We have with us representatives of UNICEF Philippines, Save the Children Philippines, the Philippine Department of Education, and the SEAMEO Secretariat. I am confident that all of you will be inspired by our distinguished guests and speakers, as well as each other. You will be inspired by your fellow learners who will share whatever they have developed in terms of new and active responses to the crisis which we just underwent. Through this event, we hope that you will gain valuable knowledge and insights to guide you as you design and build learning spaces that are responsive, adaptive, and inclusive for all learners. Once more, welcome to this webinar and warm wishes for a fruitful interaction between and among learners as well as speakers and facilitators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Briones, for that inspiring message and the warm welcome. Next, let's hear about the current education landscape. Please welcome Mr. Izzy Faingold, Chief of Education from UNICEF Philippines, and Ms. Cheska Guzman, Education and Emergencies Consultant, also from UNICEF Philippines. They will set the context of today's learning session and discuss child-friendly, resilient schools. Mr. Izzy and Ms. Cheska, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to SEAMEO INNOTECH for this kind invitation to UNICEF to participate in the ALM webinar. And thank you to the former Secretary Briones for inviting UNICEF to deliver this presentation on the topic of the webinar. Myself, Izzy Faingold, Chief of Education of UNICEF Philippines, will present some important aspects related to the learning crisis in the Philippines, and then my colleague Cheska Guzman, who is our focal point for emergencies in education, will present our work related to UNICEF support to emergencies in education. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Hope you can see it. So for this part, I want to share some important aspects related to what we call the learning crisis in the Philippines. And this was already happening even before the pandemic. When UNICEF conducted the CPLM, the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics, in which 6 countries in Southeast Asia participated in grade 5, we found that in the case of the Philippines, only 10% of the students at grade 5 were meeting the minimum expected standards for reading. And for mathematics, it was only 17%, reaching these minimum expected levels. So this was, of course, alarming and confirmed also the findings from PISA for secondary level for 15-year-old students that also came out in 2019. So also before the pandemic, the 80% of the students did not achieve the minimum proficiency in reading and math. As you might remember, the Philippines came last one in among the 79 countries participated in PISA in reading, and second to last one in mathematics and science. Also, another important finding from PISA is that 65% of the students reported being bullied at least a few times in a month in schools, and the average in the OECD countries was only 23%. So almost 3 times more level of bullying. And in CPLM for primary level, a very similar number was found out. 62% of the students, of the Filipino students in grade 5, reported being bullied a few times in the last month when the study was conducted. Another finding important to highlight from PISA is that the Filipino students are lagging behind in terms of having a growth mindset. And what is a growth mindset? Is the belief that the persons, or in this case the students, have that their intelligence can grow, that can improve, that the intelligence is not fixed. And so the Philippines had very low percentage of students who think that their intelligence can grow. No, around 31 out of 3 students, 33% think that their intelligence can grow. And in PISA, it was found that there is a strong correlation between the average reading score measured in the vertical axis and the percentage of students in the country who think that their intelligence can grow. So, so this correlation means that the more percentage of students that think that their intelligence can grow is highly correlated with higher levels of scores in reading. No? So that's an important thing to consider for future policies as well. And also UNICEF conducted a very interesting study, a longitudinal study following children, more than 3,400 children from kindergarten to grade 4, no, between the years 2015 and 2020. And some of the findings reconfirm the learning crisis. So for example, in mathematics, no student in the study appeared to have the necessary foundational skills required to understand mathematics at grade 4 based on the curriculum, no, at that time. In literacy, 25% of the students achieved the level of reading at grade 4, but approximately 50% understood the meaning of short text in 3 languages, no, in mother tongue, Filipino, and English. An important finding, in addition, from this longitudinal study is that children in conflict-affected areas, in this case from Maguindanao in BARM, were on average 2 years behind their peers in the rest of the Philippines by grade 4. So that is very alarming. No? So in 4 years or 5, if we include kindergarten of basic education, the students in BARM were already 2 years behind the rest in terms of learning. No? And last finding that is very important is that those who attended preschool, the child development centers or daycare center, consistently outperformed those who didn't, no, in terms of reading, in terms of mathematics, in terms of socio-emotional skills. So another evidence confirming or reconfirming the importance of attending preschool. So, but all these numbers that I shared were before the pandemic. No, when the pandemic came in March 2020, all of you know that all schools had to close in the Philippines and worldwide, and there has been very important negative effects in terms of learning. No? So in terms of learning loss. And on top of that, in the Philippines, after the pandemic, there was super typhoon Odette, no, that exacerbated the learning poverty and inequality. So 2 extreme disruptions to the education system, one nationwide and another one focused on some areas like Southern Leyte or Caraga region, among others. No? So the Philippines had one of the longest school closures in the world. You can see here the number of weeks in which schools were fully closed. No, this is as of 28th of February 2022. So, but that time the Philippines had more than 70 weeks of school closure, no, and was at the top of this list of countries that closed their schools. Second was Uganda. Other countries only closed their schools for a limited number of weeks, no? Because the evidence came out that the schools were not the driver for the transmission of the pandemic. No? So when more evidence was available, more countries started reopening their schools. No, at this point, all schools are open and the countries are recovering from the learning losses, putting in place different learning recovery strategies that are key, no, to minimize the learning loss. So in terms of the impact of COVID on education and the economy, so one is increasing inequality. Those who were from low income backgrounds have fewer opportunities to access, for example, online learning. So, and had more support at home, usually more educated parents that can support the learn at home strategies. So it was expected higher dropouts among disadvantaged, and of course, uneven access to internet and gadgets for learning. There is learning loss. So there are different estimates from different countries, but in most of the cases, there is at the minimum a 30% of learning loss, and it can go up to 2 years or close to 2 years of learning loss. And this is also linked to loss of future earnings per individual. So there are some studies that have estimated how much this generation is losing in terms of their salaries for the future. So what UNICEF and other partners are proposing to accelerate the learning recovery is the RAPID framework. There is one letter of this acronym for the set of strategies. R is reaching every child with an equity perspective and keep them in school. Try to continue with in-person classes um, as much as possible and provide supports to reach all the students. Second, the A is for assessments, especially rapid assessments that the Philippines is already conducting as part of the strategy to teach at the right level, identifying who are the ones lagging behind and what type of support they need. So region 5, 6, and 8, for example, have excellent experiences to share in terms of these rapid assessments in different languages, the local languages in these regions. The P is for prioritizing the fundamentals, the foundational skills, literacy and numeracy, adjusting the curriculum to be more targeted. So this is something also that the Philippines is advancing, and first with the most essential learning competencies that USEC DATS and Secretary Briones did during the last administration, and now the current administration is doing more efforts to continue refining and simplifying the curriculum, prioritizing numeracy, literacy, and social-emotional skills. The I is for increasing the efficiency of instruction, doing catch-up programs, targeted instruction, structured pedagogy, tutoring programs, self-guided learning, and keep supporting the teachers and using more technologies. And finally, the D is for developing psychosocial health and well-being, continue supporting mental health as the Philippines did during the pandemic and to this and until now, and supporting the well-being of students. So that's the first part of the presentation, and now I'm turning to my colleague, Cheska Guzman, who will present how UNICEF supports emergency in the Philippines.
Thank you, Issy. Again, good morning, everyone. I am Cheska Guzman, the Education in Emergencies Focal of UNICEF Philippines. So with Issy providing context on learning crisis and sharing with you the rapid framework that really aims to accelerate learning recovery, I am here to share with you UNICEF's work in emergencies, of course, here in the Philippines, which will be the core experience where we will be lifting our discussion on the importance of learning continuity in emergencies, but especially but not limited in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we move along, allow me first to share my screen. Okay, there you go. So one of the things that I also would like to discuss this morning is for me to share with you some wins and losses in education in times of emergencies, and lastly to share with you how this influenced UNICEF's work, especially on our approach on or how we approach our work in ensuring that the learning spaces that we provide and our emergency response as a whole are responsive really to the needs of learners and the community. So before we proceed, allow me to share with you first this 2022 Pulse Asia survey note that was commissioned by Senator Win Gatchalian. And one of the findings that they were able to see, no, or to have, is that about 52% of the respondents really identified the lack of classrooms as DepEd's topmost priority issue, no? Which was also identified to require really an estimate of for around 420 billion, no, to address this insufficiency. And of course, this further coincides with non-infrastructure funding requirements, no, for learning resources, for example, for textbooks, for computers, among other necessities talaga siya. Such concerns, no, are really made worse each year with disasters that greatly affecting the children, youth, and of course the education system, no, especially that the Philippines, no, was ranked first in 193 countries worldwide with the highest disaster risk, no, in the 2022 World Risk Index, as you can see on your screen. So this is why UNICEF, no, is really one with the Department of Education and partners like SEAMEO, no, in ensuring immediate access of all children to quality education in safe and secure environment. It is also because, no, that we believe that for children in emergencies, education is more than just a right, no, to learn, but it also protects them first from other dangers, no, around them, especially including the different forms of abuse, exploitation, and even in the recruitment, no, into armed groups. And then another would be schools, no, really provides life-saving food, water, healthcare, and hygiene supplies, and actually not only to learners, but also even extending, no, to their families. And we also believe, no, that it also provides, no, and it's the venue or an opportunity, no, that allows provision of psychosocial support, no, which also gives children stability and structure, no, to help them cope with the trauma that they are experiencing or have experienced. And another, no, and lastly, is that education really boosts, no, economic growth, and it in a way reduces poverty and inequality, no, because it allows an individual, no, to lead a healthy life, to participate, no, in the society and really restore peace and stability. So as we move forward, I would like and for us to really have that idea or in a context, no, that we really experience. Let me take you to one of the recent responses of UNICEF, no, that really involved different sectors and approaches, but at the same time, I will also be mentioning, no, other experiences in the different emergencies, no, that we responded to at least last 2022 up until this year. Okay. So one of the strongest, no, and most recent typhoon that hit the country is the category 5 super typhoon Odette, no, or known internationally as Typhoon Rai. So the education sector really incurred significant losses, no, in infrastructure and non-infrastructure investments. It goes to say that nakikita natin, no, yung classrooms, child development centers destroyed, different learning materials destroyed. And the concern, no, remained to be most pressing with the learning loss that was brought about, of course, by the COVID-19 pandemic and how it interrupted education cycles, no, not only in the Philippines, but also in the world. And UNICEF really supports both the infrastructure and non-infrastructure needs, no, in times of emergencies. But let's first zoom in to the infrastructure support that we provide. So during Super Typhoon Odette, we were able to deliver repair of DepEd classrooms, which also benefited, no, several SPED learners and those in the ALS. And we were also able to repair child development centers. I am emphasizing this because there is really a need for us to invest and to really look after, especially in times of emergencies, our child development centers as well, to support early learning, no, and which these repairs we also complemented, no, with wash facilities, because wherever we go, we ensure that the minimum requirements are there, that it is our approach would be multi-sectoral, especially with schools being the entry point of our key areas of work, like in wash, like in health, nutrition, and child protection. And we were also able, no, to fully rehabilitate 6 schools in the Nagat Islands through a pioneering partnership with another UN agency, which is the World Food Program, no. This was through their Cash for Work program, which we connected to school repairs or school rehabilitation, no. So I would say that this is one of our innovations, no, on the field, because we were also able to closely work with schools to establish that they also have their counterpart, that they also have power and say and involvement in this process, and the ability also to build a sense of ownership within the community, as the Cash for Work beneficiaries that were picked, no, also came from where the school was based. So apart from being able to rehabilitate the school, it was also complemented with the rehabilitation, no, of school gardens, which also supports, no, the nutrition side, no, in schools, and that will also benefit, no, greatly the learners, no, in that process. So of course, we also have this standard temporary learning spaces that UNICEF offers, no. Usually we have this 72 square meter tents for DepEd schools, and 48 square meter tents for child development centers, because um often than not, no, child development centers has lesser, no, na enrollment compared to a single grade, no, in DepEd schools. So usually schools are divided, no, into two to accommodate classes, and they freely customize it. So I believe you were able to see it in my first slide, but yeah, here it is again. So you'll this picture, if I'm not mistaken, was taken, no, in one of the smaller islands I visited in Surigao City last year. So we were able to provide this tent, no, even in the smaller islands, and the schools really try their best, no, to really take care and customize it based on their needs. Oh, and also, no, following the DepEd standards back then. This temporary learning space, I believe, was the only space that the school has, no, during the time. So it was really helpful, and it was also divided into two, no. But going back, no, UNICEF was able to provide the same, no, the same temporary learning space in other emergencies, no, that happened last year and this year, especially in the North Luzon earthquake, Super Typhoon Karding, Typhoon Paeng, and of course for the Mayon eruption, or the Mayon unrest that is still ongoing, among other supplies that you were able to support them with. But what I would like to highlight, no, really is the transitional learning spaces, no, that we provided in Southern Leyte. So if you could see here at the upper portion, no, this is the transitional learning spaces that we were able to bring, no, in Southern Leyte. This is also one of our innovation, no. But before that, before we go deeper, no, in our discussion regarding this transitional learning space, allow me to share with you the TLS design of DepEd that was actually designed, no, by a friend of mine. So this is the standard, no, or the take-off point also of the transitional learning spaces that UNICEF provided, no, but with several modifications. So let's look at it closely, no. But before we look at the modifications closely, um what's the reason, no, why we wanted to have this modifications, no? Because first, we would like to increase the TLS lifespan, no, of up to 5 years, no, that it's called transitional in that in that aspect, no, because that's the aim, no, to really increase its lifespan. And then next would be to withstand at least, no, a tropical cyclone with a wind speed of up to 184 kilometers per hour. And then third would be to reduce excessive heat while providing natural ventilation, because that's one really of the comments that we receive often, no, in terms of the different types of TLS designs that we have or have seen or currently being used, no, on the field. So if you'll see on the upper right, no, there's the picture. There's a picture inside the transitional learning space. So later on, I will be discussing one by one its components. So this picture is during one of our monitoring activities, no, where we were able to also engage with the learners. And it was also heartwarming, no, because on the lower right, there's some heartwarming letters, no, from the learners. And this is also most especially close to our hearts, because we really saw the commitment of the communities, our partner communities. The bayanihan spirit really came alive as we also engaged, no, different volunteers from all over the world with different expertise, no, and that really were able to engage the community in making these transitional learning spaces a reality. So okay, now that we know the triggers, no, or the objectives of this of the modifications, no, in this new design, let's dive deeper, no, in this in the modifications that were made. Ayan. So yeah, so let's start, no, with the design. One of the things kasi that we often hear, no, or comments that we often hear from learners, from teachers, and everyone from the field, no, is that grabe ang init minsan, especially in like island areas, like for example in Siargao, in Dinagat Islands, etc. Yung iinit talaga minsan, no, nagiging concern. So one of the modifications that we had is to use, no, local materials, no. So in the case of the transitional learning spaces in Southern Leyte, we used amakan, no, in the wall finishes. So if you remember the picture earlier, yan, ito pong mga nasa part na yan, that is amakan. And it will really increase, or it increased the comfort, no, inside the classroom, because it really allows natural ventilation, no. And of course, knowing that parts of our transitional learning space and even the original TLS design of DepEd includes wood or lumber, lahat ng cocoa lumber na ginamit were really treated to avoid the presence of termites, to also facilitate yung paghaba ng lifespan niya. And then next of the concerns that we often receive is kapag umuulan, nababasa yung ating flooring. Laging ganon, especially kapag ang naging site ng temporary learning space ay lupa, no? So to avoid flooding, one of the modifications is to include a slab to raise the building from the from the floor level. So a first layer of concrete also na hollow blocks was installed to really seal the bottom, as you can see in this portion, to avoid water from seeping through, to also protect the learners from possible accidents, and as well as to protect also the learning resources or other learning assets na meron sa ating mga classrooms. And then of course one of the objectives kanina why we had these modifications is for it to be stronger, for it to withstand a certain kph. So hurricane straps were added on the roof. So using itong mga steel straps na to for the timber connections will really increase yung strength ng structure, and then will really improve yung performance during future disaster events. And may mga steel straps din tayo na bolted sa mga post. It was really used to avoid yung rotting, which also doon din papasok yung elevation ng columns natin from the floor level, para ma-avoid din na magkaroon ng contact yung timber with water to really increase the lifespan ng ating structure. So when you if you can see this, let's go back dun sa picture earlier. Those are some of the steel straps, the hurricane straps that were included. Kada structure, kada area part ng structure actually includes that. And apart from this design modifications, of course, kasama na rin dyan yung mga furniture, like the chairs that you can see on the picture, which were actually customized and were designed by the learners with our volunteers. So at some point also adding that uniqueness, the touch of the community's presence. So that's what we also aim, that we really include them in the process, because first and foremost they are the ones who knows what they really need in terms of their context. So there you go. Okay, and apart from infrastructure support, of course, we also have non-infrastructure support. We also respond to non-infrastructure needs. So, for example, in the Super Typhoon Odette experience, actually not just in Odette, here are some standard supplies that we provide. So first would be the learners' kits. So basically, these are bags containing different supplies, school supplies that we often distribute individually to learners. And then we also have teachers' kits. So these are the same, individual kits or bags, this time containing different materials for teachers to use. And then, of course, we have the Alacinco storybooks and Adarna storybooks. So the Alacinco storybook is a developmentally and age appropriate book, no, regarding tackling about COVID-19 prevention, no. And then we also have recreational kits, school in a box. So it gives additional supplies, no, shared within classrooms for learners. There are learn at home kits as well. So if you can see this picture, no, on the upper left. So here's the learn at home kits. So it's initially it was given to households, no, to individual learners for during the time of COVID-19, because we really wanted to support um parents also, no, to for them to have materials to use to for early stimulation, no, and for to also um assist not children, since there was a time also that they are home learning from home, no, due to the pandemic. But this was also given, no, in the time of Odette as well. And there are we also give early childhood care and development kits, and we also give out surgical and washable masks, no, for our learners. So those are some of the supplies, the hardware, no, of our education response. But we also in the process, no, provide capability building and technical assistance, no, to our priority areas, no. First would be we have education in emergencies trainings. We also have ACCD in emergencies trainings, no, for our child development workers naman this time. And then we were also able previously to provide orientation training on the safe reopening of early childhood education, um to really help orient, no, to supplement uh um assist also the early childhood care and development council, no, in training on safe reopening of ECEs during the time, to really share that set of standards that were developed, and to really give that guidance as well, no, to our priority areas, no, during emergencies also especially. And then next would be we are in a continuous rollout or of the Peridex system. So the Peridex system is the prevention, early identification, referral, and interventions of delays, disorders, and disabilities in early childhood system. So the Peridex system, no, um, is one of UNICEF's thrusts, no, with the ECCD Council, to really ensure also inclusivity for young learners natin, no. So it's a system that we are supporting the ECCD Council also, which in the case of during Odette, no, we were able to have it, no, in Surigao del Norte, where we were able to support child development workers, even orienting the LGU, the parents, and we were really able to get that commitment from LGU Surigao City in terms of really catering and mapping, no, yung children with um a possible delays, disorders, and disabilities, and actually um establish that service, no, to have that partnership with LGUs, with this LG is having this partnership with the academe and other institutions, with specialists to conduct or to have online consultations, no, with these children. So that's one of the aim, no, or one of the work done, no, of the said system, which we also aim to extend also, no, not just in the daycare, so in the child development centers, but also through kinder, no, and perhaps until grade 3. So it's one of the things that we are trying to look into to also really ensure inclusion, no, and to tap also in aspects such as in early identification. And apart from that, no, we also provide, no, technical assistance in terms of strengthening national and subnational education clusters. As you know, UNICEF is one of the co-leads, no, here in the Philippines, and actually internationally, no, in terms of the education clusters. So that's in terms of the national cluster, we are currently working with DepEd, no, in ensuring the strengthening, no, of the cluster and inclusion of early childhood as well, apart from those in tertiary education, no. And in terms of the subnational education clusters, we were able to have several TA or technical assistance provision also in our priority areas during the Odette response. So for example, in Southern Leyte, there was also a policy, no, released, so supporting and establishing really the education cluster in the area. We were also able to provide capacity building activities for the cluster, no, for them to really have that capacity, or for them to be trained on cluster coordination and other areas of work that revolves around it as well. So those are just some, no, of our support to non-infrastructure needs in times of emergencies. And we also have this program, no, the learning recovery program for children in multi-grade schools. So especially, no, with the learning loss, one of the things, one of the thrusts, no, that UNICEF has is the delivery of the school in a bag, no. So the school in a bag is like a portable digital classrooms that contains laptops for teachers, tablets for learners with offline, no, learning materials, which were distributed, no, to Northern Samar and other Samar schools, no, to support children affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And apart from that, no, we were also able to extend this to areas affected, no, by Typhoon Odette, no, which eventually benefited 6,170 learners in the process. So we also have this to complement this, we also introduced the Learning Passport, which is a digital learning platform, no, that was developed to contain learning resources, no, available online or via mobile app then, no, or offline. So it was introduced in the same areas, no, to really support quality learning. Of course, in partnership, no, with our different partners like Educo and Smart, we also trained, no, the teachers on its use and how it could be integrated, no, in their classes, no. So that's one of the areas that we also supported, especially in multi-grade schools, no. And what's what one of the things that came out of it is that teachers say that it somehow extinguished, no, in a sense, the stigma that only private schools can use tablets or has tablets no in schools. These are some accounts no shared while during my visit no in the Nagat Islands, which um really was feedback no from the teachers based from uh how they integrate it no in their everyday teaching and learning activities. And yeah, so you can see here no on the right a sample of the school in a bag, and and during the some snippets no during the teachers training. Okay. And of course, no, we also our work no also includes that aspect in CCAM education no. This was co-designed then of course with DepEd, DRRMS. So we have changed the current. So it has two phases no, and it is basically a 6-week co-curricular online training program no that promotes adolescent empowerment and civic engagement no through different activities no community based climate action activities. So we involved 110 students no, and at the same time 110 teachers also, and was able to have 19 grant winning project proposals no that were really implemented no through a seed funding. So it was participated also no by at least 8,000 more adolescents no from the target communities. And during the phase 2 no, which is currently ongoing, the goal really is to heighten no yung self-efficacy no among the educators and adolescents to uh engage in that co-designing and implementation process no of action activities no na are relevant no to their context. And of course, to strengthen climate education and action of and to have that action community of practice. Ayan. And of course, no, it is all our work, no, on education in emergencies and DRRM is also complemented, no, with different materials developed, no, for the past year. We were able to develop this IC DRRM module no this project no really intends to equip DepEd schools no and LGUs with resources and the capacity no to ensure children's needs, especially those with disabilities and even IP learners no are responded to before, during and after disasters. So our pilot here no, our area is Angeles City, Pampanga. So apart from this module no, we also have the ICCDRRM, a compendium of learning resources and materials. We also have comics, flyers, and videos no in the process. And this is also the phase 2 of this is also ongoing as of now. So what I really would like no to leave and remind everyone is that yes, those are UNICEF's intervention, because we really believe that education is a life-saving and life-sustaining intervention no? And education must really be prioritized in emergencies. In the discussion we were able to see the wins, the losses no that we have in times of emergencies, why it is important to ensure learning continuity in emergencies no, and the different models that UNICEF was able to, or the innovations also that UNICEF was able to um uh have in the field, no, to really improve or to ensure that our response interventions are responsive, no, to the needs of the learners and the communities. We were able to discuss that, and it goes to say that, to sum it up, education again is a life-saving and life-sustaining intervention that must be prioritized in emergencies. And as our former DepEd secretary and now SEAMEO INNOTECH director, Ma'am Liling, said, no, this is back when I was still with DepEd, no, that really made a mark on me. And she said, whatever is happening, no, in the country, whatever challenges we are facing, education must continue, because education cannot wait. Our learners cannot wait. And UNICEF is with you, no, in ensuring education, in ensuring learning continuity for every child. And again, thank you so much for having UNICEF Philippines. And to know more about our work, you may follow us on social media and visit our website. So yun lamang po at maraming salamat.
Thank you, Sir Izzy and Miss Cheska. It's just the first part, but we're already learning so much. So we're also seeing a lot of good comments, or good questions in the comments section rather. But instead of a usual Q&A session, what we'll do is we will gather all your questions for our guests today and answer them through a separate video, which we will be posting on our various social media platforms after this webinar. So please keep on posting your questions in our comment section. And speaking of the comment section, we noticed that we have viewers not just here in the Philippines, but in other countries as well. So we would like to say hello to our viewers from Indonesia, Malaysia. We saw from the Ilocos region, Cotabato, of course, NCR, and CAR. We also noticed someone share that they were already implementing e-impact before the pandemic, and it would have been great if the e-impact program, along with its self-learning modules, would be given a lot of support because they're pretty much effective. Actually, we have a podcast series on e-impact as well, and you can check them out on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. We will be linking those down below. So thank you again for sharing your comments, for your insights and suggestions. We will be taking note of all of them. All right, so speaking of comments, again, keep them coming because we will be giving something later on. So specifically, we would like to get your thoughts and insights on what a responsive and resilient school is. So again, please share your answer to our question, how do you imagine a resilient and responsive school, on our comment section across all platforms. So from your answers, we will select not just one, but 2 lucky winners who will get to win INNOTECH goodies. So what do we have here? So what's in my INNOTECH bag? Here we have our canvas INNOTECH tote bag. It's very durable and it has a partition for all your needs. What else do we have? Okay, so we have a notebook and pen set, very much essential. So yeah, that's great. What else do we have? Our official INNOTECH polo shirt. Here we go. Gray is a great color for everyone. And lastly, we have a copy of the SEAMEO INNOTECH Educational Innovation Digest. So it's one of our publications. All right, so please keep your answers coming. So again, how do you perceive a responsive learning space? Okay, a responsive and resilient school. All right, so we will be announcing these winners later. Okay, so anyway, moving on. You probably heard that INNOTECH held a youth summit last June with the theme Transforming Education in Southeast Asia. So it was attended by more than 100 youth leaders from all over the Southeast Asian region. And we asked them, as well as other learners, how they envision a responsive learning space. Let's watch this.
From the Philippines.
I am Ivan G.
Villases from Quezon.
Hello everyone, my name is Ezra Karupa from Philippines. I'm Patricia, one of the Technical Specialist Manager for Robotics for High-Tech Power Incorporated.
I'm Nikhil Tabayag from Catanduanes State University.
Hello, I'm John D. Topo from Catanduanes State University, and we are the OJT in High-Tech Power Incorporated.
My name is Jamari Vitorama from Catanduanes State University. Dito sa amin, ma'am, we create our own robotics.
It's a place that allows students to become themselves, to maximize their potential, and be heard. So how about you?
A learning space for me is a place where a student feels safe to learn about the things that they love, and learning space where yung walang disturbance and makakapag-aral sila ng maayos.
And a learning space for me is a space wherein a student can maximize their potential by learning in different ways. Like if you're a visual learner or a tactical learner, such as that. That is what I think a learning space is.
I describe it as an environment where we can learn efficiently.
A space where learners can, or the skills of the learners are nurtured and developed according sa intelligence that they have.
Comfortable space or an area where an effective learning happens. It is also a space where a student can develop their skills and their potentials.
As a computer engineer, para sa laboratory, we interact each other and build in communication.
Learning space could be everywhere because nowadays napapaligiran tayo ng technologies.
Yung learning spaces po kailangan namin mabigyan ng opportunity to explore some things and to learn things.
Space wherein the teacher and all of the people who facilitate learning is prepared to cater to the students' needs and possible wants whenever the student needs it. So for example, we have been struggling with mental health. I think that a responsive learning space should be able to cater to that student in whatever capacity that they are able to, as well as to be able to learn more about themselves with the social movement and LGBTQIA representation as well. I think that they should be able to learn how to express themselves in that avenue. That is what I think are responsive and ready and prepared learning spaces.
Siguro pinakauna is yung consideration po ng comfortability ng mga students and teachers. Kung mapapansin po natin yung mga classrooms sa Pilipinas, napakaliit, napaka-konti lang po ng kayang i-accommodate, and at the same time, sobrang init po. And I think those factors affects the efficiency po of students' learning.
Yung bawat multiple intelligence ng each learner is na bibigyan ng pansin, and at the same time, nade-develop siya and nurtured according to what are their skills, and not only in the field of academics, but also in other skills like arts, music, and others.
Safe for the students, and also it is space na makakatulong sa kanila to improve on their academics and also extracurricular.
Nakakabuild kami naman ng pagiging critical thinking and paghumog ng sarili naming kakayahan.
Once na ang learning space ay may technology, ito ay nagbibigay sa atin ng advantage.
It's prepared for anything. So either that's a mental health crisis or any initiative led by students, they're willing to support those initiatives. And I think that's what really matters, that they're prepared for whatever the students may need, so that they can be able to maximize the learner's potential.
we've had it, we've heard it from our youth. According to them, a responsive learning space should be safe, comfortable, learner-centered so they can reach their full potential. Okay, let's dive into this further and explore ways on how we can provide the best learning environment for them. So it's now time to meet our first set of panel guests. Earlier, I have mentioned how excited I am to exchange stories with them. So I'm sure you're also excited, and let's not wait any further. So our first guest is Ms. Lauren Nerisse Bautista. She is a specialist from the Educational Innovation Unit of SEAMEO INNOTECH and has worked on many projects related to alternative learning modalities. One of her recent works is the development of the Alternative Education in Emergencies Toolkit. Our next guest is Ms. Emmy Yanga-Domingo. She is an officer also from the Educational Innovation Unit of SEAMEO INNOTECH. She has worked on studies related to alternative learning modalities in Southeast Asia. So good day, hello, and welcome, ladies. Hi. Okay. All right, so earlier we showed a video on how the youth envisions a responsive learning space. So I'd like to ask you ladies a similar question. So how would you describe a learning space?
So, Kay, throughout my childhood, I've always perceived the schools and the classrooms as my learning spaces. However, as times have changed, and especially since I'm now a mother to a 6-year-old, I think that my understanding of a learning space has really evolved and has transformed to something that is beyond the classroom and the school traditional setting. I think that the learners, just like my daughter, they can learn anytime and anywhere. And I think that, as mentioned earlier by the youth representatives, that learning can be made meaningful in these learning spaces if they are more of based on the needs, the interests, as well as the personal circumstances of our learners. Allow me to also mention, Kay, that within Southeast Asia, there are still several learners who cannot readily access or benefit from traditional school-based formal education, especially in the marginalized communities. These learners are those who are out-of-school youth children, youth and adults, as well as those who are at risk of dropping out. So for me, I think a responsive and resilient learning space should be able to offer more flexibility in terms of time, space, curriculum, instruction, and resources. As mentioned earlier, it could be within and outside the formal education and should be able to consider the distinct circumstances of the different learners.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Emmy, for your thoughts on the learning space right now compared to before. So I'm going to you, Ms. Lauren. Ms. Emmy mentioned a while ago about the varied types of learners. So we know that they have unique contexts and backgrounds. So what are some ways to address these various circumstances? What do you think?
Yes, Kay. As mentioned by Emmy earlier, there are still a lot of children, learners, youth across the region in Southeast Asia who are not able to access the more traditional formal schooling. So in the region or in Southeast Asia, there are education programs that actually cater to the different needs of learners. In some places, they are called alternative education programs, and then some call them alternative delivery modes, but generally, they are also known as alternative learning modalities, or what we call ALMs. So ALMs are viable alternative programs or methods of delivering basic education that may help students, whether they are regular school or otherwise, to continue learning even when they are facing challenges or maybe they are in different circumstances in life. Yeah, so ALMs have been around for decades across the region and even all over the world. So they are designed to be inclusive interventions with flexibility in terms of scheduling, maybe place of study, and even the content, so allowing students to acquire competencies of basic education. Yes, and just to add to that, so based on literature, there are two broad types of alternative learning modalities, or ALM. So first, there is the alternative access programs, or those programs that offer the same curriculum, they use the same curriculum, but the teaching and learning delivery is offered in a different way or different methods. And then there are alternative curriculum provisions or programs that are designed to offer non-traditional or alternative subjects but still parallel to the formal system. So in both types, some programs may be transitional or those that are intended as short-term responses to temporary situations like emergencies, or maybe as a bridging interventions for group of learners who will eventually join the formal education system. And there are programs that are foundational in nature, that is, they are longer-term responses to more systematic education challenges.
Wow, okay, so I'm learning a lot right now, ladies. It's good to know that alternative modalities have been around for quite a while, not just the recent pandemic, no? But can you also please give more examples of ALMs here in Southeast Asia?
Yes, Kay, I think we can start with an example, no, from our home country in the Philippines. No, the Department of Education has actually been implementing, no, the Open High School program. It's an alternative access for students who are at risk of dropping out. No, it really aims, no, to provide learners access to formal education, and it aims to cater to learners who are unable to attend the regular class program due to various reasons, no, such as physical impairment, work, financial difficulties, distance of home from school, and even possibly those who were affected by calamities or emergencies. No? So learning mostly takes place outside of the schools, no? Mostly in their homes, no? Using self-learning modules as their learning materials. So essentially, OHSP really uses distance learning, which encourages learners to become independent learners. Our next example, no, is still under alternative access ALMs, can be found in Thailand. It's called the homeschool program. Homeschool program can be classified into 3 types, no? And it really depends on which group is implementing it. So the first one is the homeschool program, which is being run by parents who take care of the many aspects of the program. For example, managing the learning activities, the day-to-day learning activities of the learners. The second type is the homeschool program, which is being run by a group of families, no? And learners are being taught by volunteer teachers as well as skilled parents in the group. And third, there's also the homeschool program, which is being run as a learner's center. Usually, it's being implemented by an organization and being taught by, again, volunteer teachers as well as members of religious groups.
Yeah, for examples of alternative curriculum provision programs, in the Philippines, we have the Alternative Learning System, or ALS. And also in Indonesia, we have the equivalency education as an example. So first, let's go to ALS. So I'm sure a lot of us already know what ALS is, but just to give a brief background, ALS is a parallel learning opportunity to the formal education system. So in the Philippines, it offers several programs at different levels of learning aimed at out-of-school youth and adults who are not able to complete their basic education due to probably circumstances in life or other reasons, But they would want to continue their school and finish basic education. So ALS uses a different curriculum compared to that of the formal education system. So it's different in terms of structure, in terms of scope and competencies. And the curriculum of ALS also includes additional competencies targeting the life situation and realities of out-of-school youth and adults. So in Indonesia, the equivalency education, or what they call EE, is one of the well-established non-formal education programs in the country. So similar to the Philippines ALS, the EE offers second chance opportunity for children, youth, and adults who have missed out on completing their basic education from the formal school. But the difference is, in Indonesia, the EE programs are implemented by either the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Religious Affairs. Usually, they have community learning centers, which is also similar to what we have in the Philippines for ALS.
Wow. So thank you so much for these examples. I think what really struck me was giving a second chance to these learners who are not able to enroll in formal school for whatever reason. So I can really see the importance of ALMs in catering to these types of diverse learners and because they have their own needs. So moving on, what are the components to ensure the flexibilities of these ALMs you mentioned?
Okay, allow me to answer that question. Our ALM programs, essentially, they have the same components as our formal education. However, ALM programs differ from the traditional system in the sense that ALMs actually use flexible learning approaches. And this really stem from having varied circumstances of our learners. So flexible learning approaches aim to seek to give learners as much control and choice as possible despite having constraints or limited resources over what, when, why, where, and how they learn. Now, such flexibility should be able to consider several aspects of the program. So first is the policy environment, then the curriculum, the instructional method, the learning delivery, learning materials, learning environment, and also the learning assessment certification and the post-program pathways and opportunities. So after graduating. So this approach allows this flexibility, allows the alternative learning modalities to address the existing challenges within the education system. And we have a lot, we have the economic constraints, we have the limited school infrastructure, we have even limited or lack of interest from among the learners, and even health considerations, teenage pregnancy, and natural or man-made emergencies. And so these challenges actually have been around for decades. And we know that ALMs have been helpful in addressing these challenges. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that the face-to-face and teacher-led formal education systems worldwide had to be suspended, so we can keep the learners safe. And so we also know that the education ministries around the world were compelled to explore various ALM strategies to ensure learning continuity.
There's a lot to consider when we have to choose which ALMs are best, Ms. Emmy. You also mentioned emergencies, so there's typhoons, man-made disasters, and such. So why is it important to continue education even during those critical emergencies?
Yes, Kay, I'm so glad that you asked that question because we all know that education is a fundamental human right. So education in emergencies, or EIE, allows children and youth and even the adult learners to continue receiving quality education during emergency situations and recovery periods. So EIE promotes the overall well-being of learners and even their families by minimizing their exposure to danger, of course, during emergencies, and providing them a safe learning space and access to life-saving information. EIE can also help learners overcome trauma by providing a return to familiar routines, going back to classes, learning, and being with their friends in school or maybe in an alternative space, and instilling hope for a better future. So given all these things, of course, EIE planning and implementation should involve learners, parents, teachers, school heads, education authorities, and the rest of the community.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Lauren and Ms. Emmy. I'm learning so much about all these alternative modalities. So first, it has been around for a long time, not only during the pandemic, and it also caters to those who need a second chance at getting an education because, again, we all deserve to have an education so we can thrive in life. And of course, the flexibility and the many considerations here. So based on what you shared, learning spaces do not necessarily mean just the classroom or just the school. So it can happen anytime and anywhere, right? So as we generally experienced in the past 3 years with all the online learning and mobile learning. So it's also interesting to hear that, again, they've been around for decades, not just the past 3 years. So these practices were more obvious during the pandemic because we were all experiencing the pandemic all at the same time. So I'm really glad that we're putting alternative education in the limelight now. So thank you so much again, ladies, for sharing your time and your expertise. I really love this storytelling session with you. So thank you. And wow, time went by so fast. It's now time for a break before we proceed to the second half of our panel discussion. So earlier, we heard the youth and their thoughts on responsive learning spaces. Now let's hear it from the teachers and school heads. Let's watch this video.
A learning space is where I discover amazing things with the help of my teachers who inspire my curiosity.
Staff meetings and collaborative spaces provide opportunities for non-teaching personnel to share experiences, exchange ideas, and learn from each other's expertise.
With the closure of schools and social distancing measures, we shifted to learning models. Online platforms and video conferencing tools became essential for virtual classrooms, allowing us to attend classes from home.
Remote learning blurred the boundaries between our home and school life for us, requiring us to create dedicated learning space within our living environments.
Some of us face challenges in accessing remote learning due to the disparities in access to technology in the internet.
We had to adapt our teaching methods to suit online learning environments, utilizing various digital tools to engage students effectively. I underwent training and professional development to enhance my digital teaching skills and adapt to the new learning landscape.
We explored alternative assessment methods through online quizzes, project-based assessments, and digital portfolios. Also, in remote learning environments, we provided a more individualized support and feedback to learners through one-on-one virtual meetings and communication channels.
As a school principal, I firmly believe that schools can further provide a better learning space that is responsive and adaptive to the changing needs of students by fostering a culture of continuous improvement and adaptability among teachers, staff, and students. Encourage everyone to see challenges as opportunities for growth and learning.
I believe that schools can further provide a learning space that is responsive and adaptive to the changing needs of the students by encouraging schools to collect and analyze data on student performances, learning styles, and needs. In fact, we have our own DepEd Dasmariñas online learning space, which caters to more than 16,000 online distance learners actively engaged in self-paced, interactive learning. DepEd Dasmariñas online learning space impact goes beyond our division. Its replicability on the national scale makes it a true game changer in distance learning.
Wow, so much has truly changed in the learning spaces across the region. A lot of teachers turned to alternative means during the pandemic, and very understandably so. And now that we are returning back to face-to-face classes, we see that some schools retained their innovations. Some continued with the use of technology, some also continued to use games or bite-sized or short lessons. To our audience, we are sure that your learning space has also evolved. So how about sharing it in our comment section? So can you share with us what has retained or what has changed in your learning spaces? Did you have similar experiences with the teachers and the school heads we have interviewed prior? So later, we will announce the lucky audience who will get some INNOTECH merchandise. So stay tuned and keep the comments coming. So while you're sending in your comments, we would like to thank our teachers and school heads who participated in this video. We salute you for all your hard work to ensure that education continues no matter what. and for continuously innovating to make sure that learners continue to enjoy learning. Okay, so now let's get back to our panel discussion. Earlier, we have discussed the different alternative modes of learning and how it can help connect learners and teachers in different contexts and situations. So for this segment, we are also using alternative ways to connect with our guests because hybrid is the new normal. Joining us via Zoom, we have Director Leila Areola. She's the current Director 4 of the Bureau of Learning Delivery of the Department of Education in the Philippines. Also joining us via Zoom is Mr. Marlon Matuguina. He is the Program Manager for Risk Reduction and Resilience in Education and Governance of Save the Children Philippines. Welcome to our online learning session, Director Areola and Sir Marlon. We are happy that you're able to join us today. Hello, hello.
Hello, thank you, and good day to everyone.
Yes, good day to everyone. It's nice to be here.
Yes, we are so happy to have you here. So, to start, earlier we heard about how alternative modes of education were implemented and practiced by our teachers and school heads in Southeast Asia. So now we would like to ask the two of you how you were able to implement or support ALMs as responsive learning spaces. So I'll start with Director Areola, ma'am. For what we know so far, DepEd has been implementing ALMs for a while. So can you please give us specific strategies for rolling out ALMs?
Okay, so once again, good day to everyone, especially to our participants in this webinar. Well, I have to mention that the Department of Education is actually implementing alternative delivery modes even before the pandemic. But when we experienced the pandemic, there was actually a shift in the delivery of teaching learning from the usual face-to-face to that of full distance learning, because at that time our schools were physically closed because our learners were not allowed actually to be going to school. But after the pandemic and when we resumed already in-person learning, there's already an opportunity given to some group of learners or some schools where the implementation is not just full in-person. There are instances when schools are also allowed to implement the blended learning delivery modalities. And of course, our teachers had experience already implementing distance learning. And with DepEd Order number 34, for example, series of 2022, and even its amendments, especially for the private schools, our private schools were already allowed to implement either the full in-person or the blended learning delivery modalities and that of the full distance learning. But of course, I have to mention that aside from all these learning delivery modalities, for our formal school, for those learners who can regularly go to school, or we also have the alternative learning delivery modes. And these are intended for learners who are at risk of dropping out.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much for sharing that, Director. It's really good to know how different strategies were implemented to cater to the different needs of our learners then and even until now. All right, so now, Sir Marlon, going to you. We know that Save the Children is an international non-government organization and that you support education continuity during emergencies among many other advocacies, right? So this discussion is also timely as we just celebrated the National Disaster Resilience Month last July. So here in the Philippines, we celebrated that na. So Sir Marlon, can you please share more about the initiatives done by Save the Children recently, especially in the field of education? See, sir?
Yes, specifically for education in emergency sector, Save the Children plays three important roles. First is that we implement education in emergency programs also in partnership with the Department of Education. Second, we are also the co-leader of the Global Education Cluster together with UNICEF. And also we advocate for education for children affected by emergencies. So Save the Children provides safe and protective learning environments for children to learn and play, especially during disaster events or during crisis. And part of the initiatives that we're doing is that supporting in the delivery of services, such as psychosocial support, to ensure uninterrupted learning at all times. We also provide teaching and learning materials such as back to school kits, hygiene kits, books, um, temporary learning shelters also to communities and schools where it needs to that specific support, and also toys support children even in times of disasters or crisis, because usually we miss that component also, that they need to play, and play is one of their coping mechanism also that can also integrate in terms of their learning or sense of normalcy. And recently, in partnership with the Department of Education and Students Foundation, we are implementing an ecosystem approach for school safety. One component of the project is the development of the DRRM information system of DepEd, or the Department of Education. One component of the information system is the rapid assessment of damages report. Actually, this is also one of a kind initiative and innovation that is being implemented by where radar can support in reporting the needs of the schools, personnel, learners after emergency or disaster. So it uses technology using an application. And since it was launched, it was already used in 20 hazard events, which is composed of typhoons, earthquake, and all, and has been used by more than 28,000 schools in the country. So this has actually facilitated DepEd and its partners to have a picture of school safety immediately following hazard impacts, for them to have a timely decision making on interventions um, that schools need, especially in terms of EIE. And it also demonstrates the transformative role that technology can actually play in disaster risk management, especially in education in emergency settings. So that's what we are currently doing in partnership with them.
All right. So thank you so much. It's very fascinating to hear that it's almost the total package, no, sir. You mentioned the space, the physical space. There's also materials, and you also mentioned toys along with other forms of psychosocial support. And I think that's wonderful because we have to consider the mindset or the mental state of the learners as well when we are trying to support them during times of emergencies. Okay, so I'm going to ask another question, and I think this could apply to both of you, but I will start again with Director Areola. So, Director, what were the challenges that you or DepEd experienced and the best practices that you applied when it comes to implementing ALMs?
Okay. Actually, we're used to be implementing the in-person classes or the traditional face-to-face classes. Then immediately we shifted to distance learning. And so the challenge before was because it was so soon. It was so we were all surprised that students were no longer allowed to go to school because of the pandemic, of course. So the challenge was more on what learning resources are we going to use. What was good was that we have the alternative delivery modes, of which with alternative delivery modes, we started already working on some ADM modules then. So from our experience from the alternative delivery modes where we developed ADM modules, that gave us already the idea that yes, we have to come up with learning resources, and we call them self-learning modules. We have to call them self-learning modules because the learners would be at home on their own. Of course, with the support of parents who can really provide them that quality time. But DepEd really had to find ways also on how to support these learners who are learning from home, especially for those who cannot manage their own learning. Because we have to accept that not all learners were really ready to take on independently the work. There are, of course, learners who are said to be independent learners, but there are also learners who are said to be struggling. And these learners who are struggling would be needing people, would be needing instructional support. And that's where the Department of Education had to consider also hiring learner support aides. So the first challenge was, are we ready in terms of learning resources? The second challenge was, are we ready in terms of human resources? But I have to mention that we did not only think of modules, but we also had to think about other categories of the categories of distance learning, because when we implemented distance learning, there were other subcategories. One was, of course, the modules. We had to develop the modules very soon, very fast, and we had to quality assure them. So we had the self-learning modules, and that's for the modular distance learning. And then we also had the online distance learning. For online distance learning, it should have been an advantage, because it would be like the learners would have an opportunity to be with their teachers face to face, although it would just be through virtual.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not all learners do have the devices. They don't have the digital devices. They don't have laptops. More so that they do not also have stable internet connections. So only those with stable internet connections and with gadgets, with the digital devices, were able to get into online distance learning or offline distance learning. Then we also had to think about what's going to support the modular learning. So we thought of the radio-based instruction. That's why for radio-based instruction, we had to develop also learning materials for the radio-based instruction. So we had to develop radio scripts and audio lessons.
Yes.
And then learning from our experiences in the past, we thought of the educational television. That's why the DepEd TV was born. So we had to develop DepEd TV episodes. However, for DepEd TV, for the educational television and that of radio-based instruction, they cannot be considered standalone. Why? Because we have to consider airtime.
Yes.
So could you imagine from kindergarten to grade 12, having all the educational television or radio-based instruction? Certainly, we cannot cover all the lessons in a day. So there's just something like 1 or 2 episodes. So this should go with so that the TV or radio-based instruction had to be a supplement to either the modular learning and that of the online learning. In like manner with online learning, our learners cannot get into online learning for the whole day, because we also have to consider screen time.
Yes.
Because we have to consider the health of the learners. So these were all the things that challenge us. These were all the things that we really had to face. But we had to do a lot and work a lot collaboratively in order for us to be able to address all this. And we were able to at least respond for learning continuity with all this learning delivery modalities that were introduced.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. I remember, if I were just to share a little bit, my youngest brother, he finished his last 2 years of grade school through modules. He was in grade school, and it was my sister who was in college who helped him through the modules, and not really my parents, because they're busy. And I think it's really fascinating also that you mentioned that for every creative solution that you thought about, right, like the radio and the TV and the online, there's always a new challenge. So we never run out of challenges, no? But I think that's the point of innovation also, is to keep thinking of new solutions or ideas to these modern challenges. So thank you again, Director, for sharing your experiences and your best practices. So similarly to you, Sir Marlon, also we would like to hear what were the challenges that you faced and the best practices that you guys implemented when you were doing all these responsive programs. Sir?
Yes, in terms of some of our experiences and challenges in EIE intervention, maybe in general, some of the things that we've experienced is first, sometimes the early childhood care and development, or like specifically for children on early years,
Yes, sir.
sometimes they are not included or prioritized in some of the priority intervention. Um, or even in terms of governments or other sectors' response, they don't see education as part of the life-saving approach in terms
Oh.
of priorities after disaster, because sometimes they focus first in terms of food security, shelter, and livelihood, and those priorities are sometimes missing in general. Um, Also, IE interventions might still be homogeneous. Um, Sometimes the priority needs of the children most impacted by inequality and discrimination, such as children with disabilities, IT communities, or even gender inclusive approaches are not uh, uh, part of the priorities, even at the onset of those emergency needs or settings. So I guess those are some of the general challenges in terms of education in emergency support. In terms of some of the practices that have also been doing in together with DepEd and also in with other partners, we try to introduce the CCD emergencies approach to local governments and also to partners, because I think that will help in addressing the challenge that also highlighted earlier. We also strengthen parents' involvement. So, like what Director Leila shared earlier, parents' role is really vital in terms of learning continuity uh, after crisis or disaster events.
Yes, sir.
Um, we also partner with local CSOs and people's organization ensure immediate support is provided. In the past, usually, like we tend to think that support is coming from the global or from the national going to the communities. So we try to shift a little bit in terms of really capacitating local groups within the community that knows the needs of the children after emergencies and also can provide immediate support, especially when there are challenges in terms of transportation or communication after a disaster or crisis event. Like what I shared earlier, also, we are investing also in terms of supporting the information system, especially for EIE, for the needs and ensuring the support of the Department of Education and other partners to be evidence-based, depending on the actual needs of the schools, how many classrooms are damaged, materials damaged, and children that are affected after crisis event. Maybe one of the things that we can highlight is children's participation. I think we wanted to really ensure that children participate not just as beneficiary, but really playing an active role in the
Yes.
assessment phase in terms of their
Yes.
needs and even in providing support to their peers. So I guess those are just some of the highlights for EIE based on Save the Children's experience.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Marlon. I do notice that a common realization throughout the pandemic years is that the family and the community should also be involved in the education of our learners. It's not just the sole responsibility of the teacher or the school, because it's a very holistic approach that even the parents or the older siblings, the guardians, should also be involved ideally in education. And it's good that you said, sir, the children's participation, which is very coincidental because here at Innotech, we just had the Youth Summit last June. So we really need to listen more to the voices of the youth so that we can plan better programs and I guess better strategies for them, because at the end of the day, it's really for them, right?
Okay, if I may come in,
Oh, yes.
particularly on parents, I just would like to add that parents and some other community volunteers, if there's any gain that we had actually with our experience in the pandemic, it's actually making our parents more aware of the responsibilities that they too are responsible for the education of their children, and we're so happy about that. They became more involved and more engaged actually
Yes,
in the learning tasks of their kids.
Yes, and it empowers them as well to know that they have a big contribution, not just, the usual support that they can give. And that's good. No? Everyone wins in that situation. Po. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so I think we have our last question. So this is also going to be addressed to the both of you. But first, as before, we will go with director first. So how can we sustain these good practices that you mentioned moving forward? So maybe you have any tips for our schools or other stakeholders. So let's start with ma'am again.
Okay, so actually, we have already started implementing all the different learning delivery modalities, particularly the full in-person and that of we already an experience of the blended learning and that of the distance learning. And you will note that our direction is actually to be having a learning delivery where teaching learning is technology assisted already. So we're looking forward that we'll be able to maximize already learning spaces so that it will no longer be within the physical classroom, but it can already be virtual. It can already be in the cyber side, because if I think it's important to mention that even in 2001, when we had the Republic Act 9155, as the school, a school is already defined as it's a setting where teaching learning happens, not just in the classroom, but also in the cyber side. So there's really a need for us to continue upgrading our schools, continue providing the devices, because much that we would like to implement, for example, online learning, we cannot do that without first and foremost equipping our learners with the devices that they need. And that's I have to be very I have to share you that for the Department of Education with our Vice President and Secretary Sara Duterte, this is one among her focus actually to continue providing digital resources to our learners, to our schools, in order for us to at least be able to implement all these learning delivery modalities. So, and of course, we have to continue capacitating our teachers, particularly on the implementation of all these learning delivery modalities, especially for those that actually involved high tech, so where they need to make use of digital devices. But you know, what's so good that's happening in the Department of Education is at any given time where there are calamities, for example, or emergencies, the Department of Education is already ready to address the needs of our learners. So learning continues because during calamities, it's so easy already for our schools to be shifting from the face-to-face to blended learning. And so because the learning resources are already there. So that's actually the advantage. So we're looking forward that we will be able to maximize the implementation already of all these learning delivery modalities, responding to the individual needs of our learners. So that's why now we're talking already about high-flex, hybrid learning. We're talking about blended learning, and these are all opportunities that we can provide our learners. But of course, we have to always consider the readiness of our learners when we implement all these modalities.
Okay, so thank you so much, ma'am. It's very good to looking back at the lessons that we picked up back then. No? So now we are trying to prepare our learners to easily or smoothly transition from the typical face-to-face and into hybrid or virtual if needed also, because again, hybrid is the new normal. So thank you again, Director.
And I have to include Mama because I forgot about mentioning learning resources. We have to continue developing learning resources appropriate for all these modalities so that when these are needed, then we would be ready for it.
Oh, that's right, ma'am. Because there is a difference between utilizing a material that is typically for a face-to-face situation, and then it's not like you can easily use it in a virtual learning environment po. So it's good to also maybe modify it a little bit so that the learners would maximize the learning experience. Thank you, ma'am. So similarly, again, Sir Marlon, so how are you planning to sustain these good practices that you implemented a while back?
Um, One of our reflections also maybe is really expanding the partnership. I know DepEd and other stakeholders are involved during EIE, but we also need to ensure that the local government units are also involved,
Yes.
especially that during emergencies, usually schools are used as evacuation centers, so that also disrupts the education of our children. So local government should be involved, strengthen our parents' support and participation,
Yes.
and also the local CSOs and people's organization. How we can strengthen the local organizations that can support EIE during crisis or disaster events. So one of our reflection actually is that local government units can actually support in providing temporary learning shelters to schools that needs them. I mean, this is in terms of a general EIE context, not just during the pandemic. Um, Also, how to ensure that our support will be more inclusive. That means whose age group, including very young children, and considering disability, gender, and also marginalization issues. Uh, we also, since Save the Children has been working with the IEE like for a long time, we've learned to really ensure that preparedness for EIE should start early. I mean, it shouldn't be reactive because sometimes we ask support for EIE when the disaster or a crisis already happened.
Yes, sir.
So we wanted to ensure that schools, communities are already preparing. There's a preparedness for EIE so that EIE interventions will be given day one after crisis or disaster events so that we won't need time. There will be no gap for the continuity of our learners. And then the last learning also, since the one I've shared earlier regarding the information system, and also it aligned to what Director Leila shared earlier, investing in technology, investing in information system, because this will really support in terms of having evidence-based decisions and programs to the most vulnerable and uh, schools and children that needs support after crisis or disaster event. So I guess those are just some of our point based from our learning in EIE implementation.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, Director Leila and Sir Marlon. We learned so much from this session, so from policies to actual program implementations. And it's really nice to hear that we are preparing for more technology in the classroom or experimenting more with how to deliver learning despite the different circumstances, and also the inclusion of families and communities and local governments in the entire strategies being rolled out. But it's always good to hear from education ministries and implementing partners because you have a different point of view, and it is so enriching to us to hear these from you directly. So thank you again, Director Leila Areola and Sir Marlon Matuguina. So maybe next time we can talk to you again in another webinar. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you also for inviting us.
Great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm sure our viewers also gained a lot of insights from our discussions. And there you have it. Recently, INNOTECH has developed knowledge resources on alternative learning modalities. We have the ALM Toolkit, EIE Resource Kit, and EIE Infographics. These are all available online. You can download these materials for free on the INNOTECH website. That's www.seameo-innotech.org/iknow. A link to the publication is also posted on our comment section. If you have accessed or used these materials previously, please let us know your thoughts about them by sharing on the comment section. We have reached the end of our panel segment. So thank you again, Ms. Lauren, Ms. Emmy, Director Leila, and Sir Marlon. That was really an informative conversation. It was great to get different perspectives from various advocates of responsive learning spaces. We would also like to take this time to say hello to our viewers from Myanmar and Thailand, and of course, the different parts of the Philippines. So hello, we see you and thank you for spending your time with us. So now, to weave all the conversations we've had together, we invited Mr. Prasert Tepanart, former Deputy Director for Administration and Communication of SEAMEO Secretariat, and also the former Executive Director of Save the Children Thailand, to serve as our synthesizer. From Bangkok, Thailand, let's welcome Mr. Prasert Tepanart.
Thank you very much, Kay, my dear MC, for wonderfully running this webinar. And good day, everyone. Director Leila, DepEd, Dr. Briones, INNOTECH Center Director, Miss Lauren, Miss Emmy, Mr. Faingold, the representative from UNICEF, Miss Cheska Guzman from UNICEF. It's my honor to be part of this important webinar today. I can imagine how timely it is that this webinar is taking place. We have seen so much of ALM that has evolved during the COVID pandemic in the past 3 years or so. But let me tell you, ALM did exist many decades ago, and we have seen that learning took place outside the classroom setting. But we just realized that with the pandemic, most of the institutions, including schools and workplaces, started to use online learning as well as online meeting. And as you have seen that in our Southeast Asian region, ALM did exist in mosque or in Tepanart, in Buddhist temples as well as in churches. So I'm very delighted to do this synthesis of this webinar, as I have been working with UNICEF Thailand in the past, SEAMEO Secretariat, and Save the Children Thailand at different periods of time in my professional life. And I'm very familiar with the work that you are all doing. The panel discussions that we have observed today highlighted the important synergy as well as fruitful collaborations between different stakeholders, be they the Department of Education of DepEd in short, UNICEF Philippines, Save the Children Philippines. Many educators and youth have been involved to enable education to continue, despite the very fact that the COVID pandemic has prevented all of us from gathering. Let me highlight some of the findings or some of the presentations made by various entities, UNICEF, DepEd, INNOTECH, and Save the Children Philippines. They all have pointed out the importance of education continuity in the face of natural calamities or even pandemic, the COVID one, as we have seen through different initiatives that you have all undertaken. There are so many interesting findings that it would be very lengthy for me to mention all of them, but I can highlight that CPOM PISA and the longitudinal study that UNICEF have presented have highlighted that children in conflict affected areas as well as many marginalized children were on average behind their peers in other groups because there's a lot of disruption in their daily education. Education cannot go on at a normal pace. So ALM is something that we need to look into to enable education to continue. And for these marginalized children or children affected for the children affected in these areas to be able to catch up with their peers. So during the pandemic, we have experienced many closures. You know, I don't need to mention that there were so many waves of COVID, and each wave came with the closure of schools or educational institutes. In the Philippines, as the survey has pointed out, you know, the closure in total lasted about 72 weeks. That is very long, in fact, and that would amount to quite almost 1 year of loss. And this prolonged closure also resulted in increased inequality between children and learners. There were learning loss of about 1 to 2 years because of this closure, and losing the opportunity to earn incomes for the future is also facing learners who will in the future go into workplaces. In addition, UNICEF Philippines have also worked side by side with DepEd, with SEAMEO INNOTECH in education in emergency, or in short we call EIE, to ensure that learning continuity and access to quality education can take place. There has been a lot of support on transitional learning space. Not only that, there has been support in terms of non-infrastructure needs and capacity building of stakeholders in the educational arena. EIE is therefore important that education can continue and that learners can continue their education despite the fact that they are not able to attend the formal or informal classes, but it can take place in any spaces that is conducive for learning. Besides education continuity, EIE is also important because it prevents a lot of abuses that take place at home, because parents during the pandemic were also forced to work from home or they were out of jobs. It prevents exploitation and trauma experienced by people affected during the pandemic time. I'm sure I don't need to mention the long amount of work from home, you know, the irregular working hours where parents have to bear with house chores, and at the same time, they have to look after their children. How ALM can be a lesson learned for us, as well as a springboard on how we can improve future calamities or pandemic that might happen in the future. In the case of DepEd, there was a lot of combination between face-to-face learning and distance learning. In many countries, we call online learning, and in some countries, we call remote learning. It depends on the context that we are using. But let me say that, you know, this is part of ALM, you know, combining face-to-face with distant learning, so we can maximize learning spaces in delivering education. And one thing that we learned about the pandemic is that digital resources need to be improved substantially in our region if we want to ensure that ALM can take place effectively. What is the point if we have good educational modules, but our ICT devices are not well equipped for our learners to learn online? And for NGOs such as Save the Children Philippines, there have been several projects on ALM implemented through emergency education for children in affected areas. As we are all aware that the Philippines is one of the hardest hit countries during the COVID pandemic. And it is also one of a few countries, that has so many typhoons in a year. In fact, most of the typhoons that happen in the Pacific Ocean first hit the Philippines, Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand. And DepEd and all the educational institutes have been so well equipped, to prepare themselves whenever there would be any calamities that hit the country. There have been many social support from CSOs such as Save the Children Philippines to provide support needed for children and learners affected during any emergencies. Rapid needs assessment have been carried out. And I remember when I was with Save the Children Thailand, whenever any emergency take place, this rapid needs assessment need to be implemented before we can assess what kind of initiatives and what kind of activities that should be implemented in the affected area. Therefore, I would highlight that EIE intervention is very important, especially nowadays when we are facing climate change, anything that can just happen overnight. And we must be ready anytime when all these emergencies strike and not wait for 1 week, 1 month, etc., for us to implement all these activities. That is, I would stress the importance of readiness in our ALM or in our educational modules. And also the panel discussions and some of the literacy, that I have reviewed and that have been implemented by INNOTECH also highlight some of the common areas or commonalities of the use of ALM in our regions. I would summarize that, most of the ALM used in the regions have applied flexible learning approaches. It depends on the circumstances of the learners and the availability of the educators or teachers. For example, university students, they are more adept at learning remotely or online, and their concentration span is a bit wider than early childhood care and education system, where children have a shorter span of concentration. And I would be mindful that when we apply ALM, we need to focus on who the learners are. We do not want to squeeze very tight time, so all the learners do not have time, to have a little break or to go for lunch. And we must be mindful that, the space where learning takes place must be conducive for all the learners. I have seen in my case, during the pandemic where parents work from home and children are learning online, the sound system or, the different noises created at the background can have a lot of disruptions on the learning process. Therefore, we have to be mindful of how we can make this learning space as conducive as possible for the learners to be able to concentrate, and that all the things that are being learned need to take into the aspect of how interactive learners and educators or teachers can be. And I have also seen that a lot of ALM also focus a lot on curriculum coverage according to each semester. So let's say if formal classroom setting cannot take place, there will be online classes which may happen during the evening or during weekends. We have to be a bit mindful that too long each session can have a lot of impact on how learners can absorb what they have learned. Our concentration span is very important, and we do not want coverage to be more important than effectiveness of the ALM modules. And then we also have seen that a lot of countries in the region apply face-to-face learning when each wave dies down. And when the next wave of COVID started to hit, school closure happened again. There will be many periods of face-to-face and many periods of online learning or distance learning, interspersed by hybrid learning, where some students can make it and some students cannot make it. And we have also seen that, in many countries in the region, when face-to-face learning is permitted, each country focus a lot on safe back to school. A lot of students were asked to take ATK test to show that they are safe to attend school. Some classes even ask students to wear their mask during their classrooms. Despite all these commonalities, we can see some differences in ALM when we apply in the region. For example, in the Philippines, distance learning is applied through DepEd TV, which is very effective because each household has a TV, or now they have a mobile phone where they can access all these platforms. In Cambodia, we have equivalency program where ALM is introduced to ensure that whatever programs these students apply during ALM, whatever they learned is equivalent to what the formal education setting is. And in Thailand, there are homes school program. And I would give one example. When I was working with Save the Children, there was one project where basic education was provided in the 9 temporary shelters along Thailand and Myanmar border. I use the word temporary shelters instead of refugee camps because the word temporary shelters are seen as something more soft compared to refugee camps. The Thai government would want all these displaced people to be ultimately returned to their homeland, so they call temporary shelters. Because there was the lack of internet connectivity in these temporary shelters. In the project that I was working with, we applied home-based learning, where teachers went to different households to conduct some lessons for the children. And also during the pandemic, what is seen as useful for all the countries is that we, you know, we should advocate for the governments or the local authorities to subsidize electricity bill, because both parents were working from home and children also attending classes online. You know, electricity bill exploded during that time because, you know, people were at home, you know, either studying or working. So there should be some initiative from local governments to subsidize electricity bill during that time. And Indonesia, we have seen the equivalency education, which was carried out by the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And this ALM is quite effective. So to summarize all the presentations that I have listened and observed, each and every entity has come up with some very useful and effective ALM, and they apply it through different platforms or different scenarios. And I would highly recommend that, you know, when we apply this ALM, we have to look at the principle of no one size fit all, no one size fit all. That is to say, different countries have different contexts. We have different policy environments. Some countries may focus on livelihood education when they apply ALM. Some may apply in formal or non-formal or informal setting. And, you know, for the three southernmost part of Thailand, where a lot of emergencies take place, a lot of insurgency take place, especially during the pandemic, this has shifted to livelihood education, especially when youth return from Malaysia, because there were no jobs in Malaysia during the COVID lockdown. So the Thai government focused quite heavily on livelihood education. So all these youth will be able to obtain some jobs after the pandemic. And I would also focus that ALM should be as flexible as possible, taking into account time, spaces, curriculum approaches, the place of study, and the content. It must involve parents, teachers, school masters, central and local government agencies. All these must be involved in order to make ALM as effective and as localized as possible. It also goes beyond regular classroom setting, whether online, on-site, and even hybrid. And more importantly, whatever is conducted using ALM should be interesting, interactive, and fun. It should make use of ICT. For example, during my time with Save the Children Thailand, you know, we have a lot of online meetings. And I know that, you know, we have experienced that your concentration may be divided between the emails which pop up suddenly and how do we capture the learners or the participants' attentions so they are not distracted by all this. Is the use of ICT, you know, can you please show me if you understand this, the use of emoji, the smiling face or the doubtful face. And some quizzes are also important to ensure that all the participants or learners are focused on whatever they learn. For example, the use of Mentimeter to gauge the interest of learners on how much they have understood. It should not be a long lecture throughout. And we should increase the channel for learning. For example, there are many websites where people nowadays can learn languages easily. For example, the Duolingo example. It must be constantly evolved through surveys to improve future learning for both providers as well as the recipients. Most importantly, the learners, the ALM focus should be on the learners, on how different ways, on how we can apply for ECCD or for higher education, etc. So I would sum up that, the best thing is for each and every country to look at the best practices and apply in their own contexts, as well as focusing on who the learners are. I would thank everyone for your attention in this. Thank you very much. And thank you to INNOTECH for having invited me to do a synthesis of this very important webinar. Thank you. And have a good day, everyone.
Thank you for that comprehensive synthesis, Mr. Tepanart. Now we have come to our event's exciting part. Earlier, we asked you to comment your insights and thoughts throughout our webinar so you can win INNOTECH merch. But wait, there's more. So since we're speaking about schools and learning spaces, we will now have a pop quiz. We have 3 questions, and the first to answer each question correctly will also win INNOTECH merch. To make sure everyone gets a chance, we will assign 1 question per online platform. So it's very simple. All you have to do is type the right answer. So our team will be commenting the username of the winner in the same comment section. Okay, so are you all ready? All right, so the first question will be for those watching via LinkedIn. Again, LinkedIn only. The question will be flashed on the comment section, and you have 5 seconds to comment your answer, okay? Simple. All right, so question number 1. What does ALM stand for? Okay, so we have 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So the answer is Alternative Learning Modalities. So later we will be seeing who won. So congratulations in advance. So the winner will be flashed on the comment section, so watch out for that. Now, moving on to the second question. This will be for those watching via YouTube, so YouTube only. So here's your question. What does EIE stand for? Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so the answer is Education in Emergencies, and that's EIE. Okay, so for our LinkedIn and YouTube winners, to claim your prize, please message INNOTECH through our Facebook page. So again, if you are identified as a winner in our LinkedIn and YouTube platforms, please message INNOTECH to claim your INNOTECH merch. Okay, so the last question is for our Facebook viewers. So the question is, what is CPLM? What is CPLM? So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. The correct answer is Southeast Asian Primary Learning Metrics. So that's a bit of a longer one. Congratulations. Our staff will coordinate with you via FB Messenger. Okay, so that's exciting, isn't it? Okay, so to formally close this online event, let us hear a message from Dr. Kamaleswaran Jayarajah, Research Evaluation and Assessment Specialist from the SEAMEO Secretariat.
Mabuhay and a very good day to all of you. I am pleased and delighted to participate in this webinar on alternative learning modalities, or also known as ALM, organized by SEAMEO INNOTECH. This webinar has highlighted some significant key points on the rebuilding responsive learning spaces, specifically diving into the importance of ALM for all the learners. On behalf of Senior Secretariat Director, I would love to congratulate Professor Briones and a dedicated team for successfully hosting this meaningful event in light of our top goal to help schools rebuild learning spaces that are responsive and adaptive to the changing context and the need of our learners in Southeast Asia and hopefully beyond. Throughout this webinar, we have listened to the esteemed speakers who presented the importance of raising the awareness on continuing education in different contexts and challenges. The speakers also shared their experiences on how learning spaces have changed after the pandemic. And in fact, they also presented ways on how schools can adopt ALM to make learning spaces more receptive to the learners across Southeast Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, according to UNESCO's data on alternative solutions to school closure report, a total of 165 countries have closed schools and universities nationwide, affecting over 1.5 billion children and youth. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, countries in the region have implemented a variety of solutions, and online learning has gained much attention as most countries began to introduce online platforms for continued learning as an alternative learning method. IALM is a practical option to the existing formal instruction so learners can complete basic education in a mode that fits their distinct situation and needs. Under this flexible program, learning can be done at any time and any place depending on the convenience and availability of the respective learners. Let us look into how crucial ALM is for Southeast Asians. With more than 50 million students, 3 million teachers, 300,000 schools, Indonesia has one of the largest education systems globally. With more than 28 million students comprising 7,641 islands, the Philippines also face similar challenge in ensuring accessibility to quality education. ALM is one of the best solutions that could help learners acquire the needed basic education competencies and life skills and to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and of course promote lifelong learning opportunities for all parallel with the SDG 4. We have already implemented various kinds of ALM. For instance, the homeschool program in Thailand is a form of alternative education offered to school children who are not in school due to economic reasons, geographical locations, migration, religious requirements, and also personal circumstances or even their needs. The Philippines Open High School program provides an option to the students to finish their education through the program or continue in a regular school system. And the multiple entry exit system of Indonesia is an alternative for delivery model developed by the ministry to address the rising number of dropouts in schools. Vietnam's ADM program for island learners focuses on developing practical knowledge and skills and independent learning among the students. However, ladies and gentlemen, I believe there are much more that we can do as a team for our region. Some of the interventions that we can consider in future are the identification and mapping of potential services and programs that would be able to provide short-term and long-term support, especially in ALM programs in Southeast Asia. Other interventions which we could also include in future are greater investment in policy work, inclusive teaching methods, curriculums, and learning materials with universal design for an inclusive education in schools. Ladies and gentlemen, in times of great uncertainty, our relationship with the future becomes strained. The usual way we used to navigate tomorrow no longer work. In 2018, two powerful storms hit North Carolina, causing schools to close. Students were out of school for weeks. There were attempts at remote learning, but many children did not even have laptops or computers or other technologies. Meanwhile, in our region, the Philippines reported that 35 schools were damaged due to the magnitude of 7.0 earthquake in Abra, and Abra province delayed the opening of classes for school in 2022 due to the big number of schools destroyed. In Indonesia, data shows that from 2009 to 2018, as many as 62,687 schools and 12 million students were affected by natural disasters. With a magnitude of 7.5 earthquake and tsunami hit Palu, Central Sulawesi in 2018, almost 3,000 schools were damaged in Indonesia. Now, that is why I believe, ladies and gentlemen, our event here is impressively timely as we can work fast to share the outcomes of this event in order to voice out the perspectives from the Southeast Asia in venturing into creative ways of learning while we face constant uncertainties in today's world. We look forward to work closely with SEAMEO INNOTECH in following through this webinar to ensure that the outcomes of this webinar can be utilized by all. Such collaborations support important initiatives such as home-based learning and virtual school programs, apart from serving as a beacon of light for many of the unreached and unprivileged learners in Southeast Asia. We can measure the efficiency of our past, present, and future efforts parallel with the team rebuilding responsive learning spaces, diving into alternative learning modalities. Most importantly, through these presentations today, we are strengthening evidence-based policy making in the region, providing policymakers with information to be able to develop appropriate and responsive policies, programs, and interventions for ALM initiatives in our region. I once again thank all of you for your time, effort, and patience throughout this meaningful and significant event. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal, for the wrap-up. Everyone, that concludes our online learning session. And I know you're all excited to know if you won our little engagement activity. So earlier, we asked you how you define a resilient or responsive learning space. So it's time to announce our winners. All right, so congratulations to Jenny Amadeo from Facebook and Loloy Cardesian from YouTube. Congratulations, guys, you won INNOTECH merch. Now, to get a certificate of participation for this event, please answer our end of program evaluation form. You may access it by scanning the QR code shown in your screen or by clicking the link we have posted on the comment section. The survey will be open until the end of today, August 10 at 11:59 p.m. Philippine Standard Time. The certificates will be shared to you at a later time, so follow us on social media and stay tuned for updates. Thank you very much to all our viewers on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn for actively participating in this conversation. We hope that you had an informative and meaningful time with us. May we all work together to provide a responsive learning space and help build a better future for our learners. Again, I'm Kay, and see you on our next online events. Goodbye!
We have come with hope so bright. pag naglo-low pressure, kinakabahan po ako kasi baka naalala ko yung bagyong Odette. Nag-aral po kami dati, module lang po naming matutunan. Pag sa module, pag di mo nasagutan ang tanong, bababa grades mo, pwede kang bumagsak.
Dito po kami nagtago yung bagyong Odette kasi sobrang lakas ng hangin. Dito po.
Mga ilan kayo dito?
Mga lagpas 20 or 15 lang po.
Nag-ano na yung mga teacher na nag-face to face na excited po ako. Kasi po, pag sa face to face, maintindihan mo yung mga teacher ng maayos, tinuturuan ka ng maayos. Po ang mga binigay ng UNICEF. Meron pong color pencils, tapos po mga crayons, tapos mga scissors po, tapos mga notebook, tapos po sketchpad. Nakakatulong po ito sa pangarap kong maging architect. Kasi po mahilig kami mag-drawing ng mga kapatid ko, tapos masaya po sa tent. Paglaki ko, pag naging architect na ako, tapos mag-iipon na ako ng mga pera, tapos papagawa ko itong school.